Today we're going over 9 steps to master one of the most important skills of them all, and that is sight reading. If you feel like sight reading is one of your weaknesses, then see if you're truly addressing every single one of these 9 points. I know I personally have often neglected steps 6 and 9 of the ones that we're going to be talking about today, so these are going to be really good for advanced players, but also for earlier and intermediate players, along with the book recommendations at the end. Sight reading is the ability to read and play something that you've never seen before, often on first sight. But really, the second and third attempts are also sight reading. It's one of the most valuable skills because it allows you to play music without extensive prior practice. It can be challenging though because it does require a really good combination of technical and musical skills. We're going to work on bringing our sight reading up to as close to the same level as we learn and play pieces at. They'll never be the same level, but we're going to aim high. Step 1 is practice. We practice our scales, we practice our pieces. We might even be practicing some music theory, but are we practicing sight reading? There's a reason that people are put off practicing sight reading, and I think I discovered it in, of all places, at the dentist. After asking me what I did, I explained that I was a pianist, and he said that he too played as a child, but he was put off by playing or practicing the sight reading. It was the unknown, he said, the lack of control, the uncomfortable feeling that it gave him. Although in this case he felt very strongly about it, I believe this is the reason why we shy away from sight reading, and that's because it can sometimes make us feel uncomfortable. If this is the case, there are 2 things that you need to do, and the first one is just to start with easier music. Start with simple pieces that are well below your current level. The second is to develop a really strong foundation and structure for your sight reading by following these next steps. This leads me onto rhythm. One of the first things that you can do to get a sense and a feel of the piece of music that you're going to play is to clap out the rhythm. Let's take an example of Chopin's waltz in A flat major. The left hand is playing the main beats of the bar, we're in 3/4, and the right hand has the melody, which is the rhythm that we're going to clap to try and get the sense of the music. Let's give it a go. No matter what level you're at, improve your vocabulary of rhythms. Good sight reading books will have rhythm exercises in which introduce and let you practice new rhythms. These can be understood and practiced away from the piano using a metronome and clapping or tapping along with it. The books will gradually increase the complexity of the rhythms that you're using. So when you encounter those like in bar 11 that uses like quintuplets and triplets and 16th notes, you're not going to have to think about them quite so much. And this is going to allow you to devote more time and more effort towards accuracy of notes and getting a better feel for the music overall. Music is often written around a hand position or an anchor note, and when you start sight reading, you'll likely be playing in a 5-finger position. So that is 5 fingers over 5 notes. Identify the top and the bottom notes and place your fingers over them. Once you have it, don't move out of position. As your music becomes more complex, we learn to work around an anchor note instead, using that particular note as a reference point on the piano. Knowing where that note is on the piano allows us to feel where we are instead of always having to look. This brings us straight on to step 4, which is to look up and ahead. Try not to waste time by looking up at your score and then down at the keyboard and alternating between the two. This will just mean that you'll lose your place and just slow your music right down. Instead, from the very beginning, find your position and keep your eyes on the music, moving it forward as you go. If you really need to look at your hands for, say, a jump, for instance, then follow these 2 steps. 1. Remember where your eyes left the score and where you're likely going to be when you look back. 2. Make it a really quick glance and ideally only move your eyes. Step 5 is keep the pulse. The pulse is the underlying beat behind the music that should never change. Practice keeping the beat and the rhythm going, with sometimes occasionally sacrificing the accuracy of notes. If you constantly slow the pulse and sacrifice the rhythm, then you're not really going to be able to get a sense of the music that you're playing. However, with the occasional inaccuracy of note, we're still going to be able to get a sense of the music as long as we have a solid pulse and accurate rhythm. Sometimes pieces require speed, but there's a balance between going really quickly and losing a sense of the music due to inaccuracy versus going a little bit slower and including a lot more detail. The key here is, even when moving fast, avoid a hectic, panicky feel to the music and instead try to aim for a calm state of mind. This will come with practice. If you need a little bit more time, then try to take a tiny bit more time on each note and each beat, rather than feeling like you're accelerating by pushing the music forwards. Step 7 is style. The style of the music is going to change the way you play it quite considerably. The two big differences here are how much sustain pedal you're going to use and how much freedom or rubato you're going to put into the music. For instance, you'd likely use quite a lot of pedal and rubato in romantic music, but not much at all in Baroque music. Become familiar with the different composers by listening to them from each of the eras within classical music. I've listed a brief summary of all of them down below in the description. Step 8 is other. This is one of the most important points to realize when we're sight reading, and that's that we want to develop a holistic approach by drawing from our practice from other areas. For instance, when you sight read, you're going to be playing in a particular key. Make sure that you know the scale from that key and some of the music theory behind it. A really good starting point would be just to be able to identify the key signature so that you know what key you're playing in. This is where following a graded syllabus This is where following a music exam syllabus like ABRSM's can be really helpful. This is because, for instance, in grade 1, you do the scales, the pieces, the sight reading, and even the music theory using the same keys. As you advance through the grades, you build your knowledge in a logical progression. Step 8 is about books, and I think there are 2 steps to follow when it comes to books, and I'd recommend doing both of them. So the first is just to start out with a pile of books on one side of your piano, and as you work through them, you move them to the other side of the piano. You can use books that you have at home, but if you don't, then head to the local library and see if you can find books that are at the appropriate level. Find a version of this that works well for you. I quite like using piano anthologies, which have loads of different pieces from like different styles, different periods, and they also vary in difficulty quite a lot. The second option is really good for earlier to intermediate players, and that's to use a dedicated sight reading series such as the Improve Your Sight Reading books. The pro to these books is that they progressively increase in difficulty. They have loads of exercises, and they also bring in rhythm exercises and new concepts in the different stages as you go. But the con to these is that the music is not always the most inspiring. Check this video out for an interesting look into the hidden numbers behind art and music, and subscribe for more piano videos, performances, and tutorials.